Welcome back to Chapter 9, Genes and Inheritance. And we are picking up with um, some more of the exceptions to Mendel. Now we're going to look at sex-linked traits. These are traits that differ in expression because they are seen more in one sex, like males or females. The best example of this is color blindness, red-green color blindness. And I can tell you in my family, we actually do have this gene. I have two uncles and a cousin who are red-green colorblind. My cousin is male as well. There are no women in our family who have red-green color blindness. So let's take a look and think about this because it's not just my family, it's in general. More men are going to be colorblind than women. So if a man is colorblind, like my uncle, did he inherit this condition from his mother, his father, or both of his parents? So if he got it from both of his parents, then we would actually, if you think this through, we would actually see it equally in men and women because you'd get that 50-50 inheritance. So then it has to be either from mother or father. So let's take a look at how this works. So the gene for red-green color blindness is actually on the X chromosome. So if you look, we've got big R. Big R is the correct functioning gene, and little r is the one that's going to be the broken version of this gene. It's creating defective proteins. So this is the one that creates the red-green color blindness. So if we have a male has to inherit a X chromosome with that broken, the little r on the X, and then he'll have a Y chromosome because remember, if you have a Y, you're a guy. So think about that. Where did he get the X chromosome? He had to get it from his mom because where do Y chromosomes come from? Y chromosomes come from dad because they're the only ones that have it. So in order for a male to be colorblind, he has to inherit that defective gene from his mother. In order for a female to be colorblind, she has to inherit defective genes from both her parents. She has to get those little r's from mom and dad because they're on the X. So she's always going to get an X from mom. She has to inherit the X from dad in order to be a female, but they have to be the broken versions from both in order for her to be colorblind. This is why, it's more rare for females to be colorblind because they have to get both copies broken. If you look down here, for normal vision for females, they can be heterozygous because the normal functioning gene is dominant. And so if they're heterozygous, they'll be what we call a carrier, meaning that they have that recessive gene, but they'll have normal color vision. Or they can be homozygous dominant, having both normal copies on their X chromosome. For males to have normal vision, they just need that one copy. And that's the thing. It's more common for males because they only get that one copy of the X. So females have an extra chance to get a good copy of that X chromosome with the correct version of any of the genes that are sex-linked. This isn't the only condition. There's also a type of hemophilia that is sex-linked as well as a couple of other conditions. All right, another thing I mentioned, for example, with height, things like food can affect your Genes, well, there are other environmental effects. So identical twins are not actually identical. You can be born genetically identical, but your environment changes your genes over time. So exposure to chemicals and so forth are actually going to change your genetic makeup. So over time, those two genetically identical twins will no longer be genetically identical. I'll give you an example of how you can actually see genetic change, and that's with a Siamese cat. So if you're not sure what a Siamese cat looks like, here's what a Siamese looks like. So could you create a temporarily spotted Siamese cat with an ice pack? Now, I do not recommend that you track down a Siamese cat and tape an ice pack to it, because this experiment has been done, because you can. But why does it work? So let's take a look at Siamese cats. So take a look at the cat. This is also true for these kinds of Himalayan rabbits. Look at where the dark parts of the animals are, right? The dark parts are the ears, the face, like the nose, the feet, and the tail. And think about those things on yourself. What are those compared to the rest of your body? They're colder, right? So those areas are colder compared to the rest of your body, and they will be on these animals as well. So what do dark surfaces do when they're in the sun? They warm up. And so these areas on these animals, the genes are actually turning on because of the lower temperatures. So as the temperatures get colder, farther away, the genes turn on to make the fur darker. If you actually could keep an ice pack on this cat right here, and change it out, you'd actually get a nice big spot on the side of the cat. I actually had a friend who had one of these Siamese cats who was an outdoor cat. It was kind of cool because during the summer, this section of the cat would all get nice and bright and colored like the chest of this cat right here. But then in the winter, because it stayed outdoors, more and more of its body would start to get this darker and darker color to keep it warmer out in the winters in Ohio. All right, the last part of the things that violate Mendel are linked genes. So some genes are what we call linked genes. And so when Mendel did his experiments, most of the traits that we know are independent of each other. So Mendel's law of independent assortment. So let's take a look at this. So I told you your book likes cats. So here is another Punnett square, this time using two different traits. So we've got a cat that is short hair. It's heterozygous for its hair, and it has white fur, heterozygous. And we've got the same thing over here for the father. All right, so we've got two heterozygous cats for both traits. And when you cross these two, what you get is what we have here in the Punnett square. If you notice, you get lots of cats that look like the parents. You see all of these cats that look like the parents? So short hair, white fur. But you also get short hair, gray fur, and you get some long hair, white fur, and one long hair, gray fur. So this is what we're talking about with the law of independent assortment. That means that one trait doesn't influence the other, meaning that short hair and white fur aren't tied together, because we don't get all of the offspring as short hair, white fur. You can get combinations of the short hair, gray fur, long hair, white fur, and long hair, gray fur. So, this is just showing you that breakdown of what we were just looking at. So we've got different combinations of those genotypes and phenotypes. So the genotypes. Um, we've got representatives of the homozygous dominant, heterozygous, homozygous recessive for the hair, and we've got the same for the fur. So what's an example of something that doesn't follow this law of independent assortment? So in humans, red hair and freckles are an example of genes on the same chromosome being inherited together. So if you think about someone who has red hair, almost everyone who has red hair has freckles. And if you look at this picture, you may also notice this individual has light, pale skin, and they're generally going to have blue or green eyes. And this is because these genes, turns out, are really close together on the same chromosome. So why do they have these pale skin and the freckles? It's because the genes are what we consider linked. They are on the same chromosome. Sometimes they're even right next to each other. So let's see what that means. So here are our genes. Now remember, we're looking at what's going to happen during meiosis. So we've got our pair of chromosomes that have been replicated. So we have our maternal set and our paternal set, so mom and dad. Now here are our linked genes. These ones up here would not be considered linked because they're really far away from each other. And why does this matter? Well, remember, in meiosis, crossing over can happen. And so if the genes are linked really close together on the chromosome, that means when crossing over happens, the linked genes stay together. And so this is why we commonly see people with red hair having pale skin and freckles, because those genes are really close together on the chromosome. And so they travel together. They rarely get split up. So that when you get to the end to making your gametes, those linked sets of genes are staying together. You can see that you've got those sets. There's the orange and gray, purple, orange and purple. They're staying in those sets together and not getting mixed up. So the inheritance of one not infecting the other only works if the genes aren't linked together closely on the chromosome, if they're not being moved together. So if the chromosomes are spaced farther apart, again, like these blue ones up here, then Mendels' law of independent assortment works, like with the cats. But if the genes are really close together, then they're going to work like the red hair and freckles. Okay, that's the end of chapter 9 with genes and inheritance. I'm also going to be linking some other videos from the Amoeba Sisters, if you enjoyed the cartoons from chapter 8. That will review some of this information in a slightly different way. It might help out some of you if it's not quite making sense. So please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.